It has dictated our lives, pretty much. We must accept that we may be wearing masks for a long time. We have to accept that COVID-19 may never, ever go away. We have to accept that it's something that is part of life. We either embrace it or not embrace it. Whatever you choose, it's your choice. I have chosen to embrace it. I'm vaccinated with 2 vaccinations and a booster. I know a lot of people believe that if they take the vaccinations, it's going to kill them. I'm sorry that they believe that. Me being a retired nurse, definitely do not believe that. So it's your call. It's your life. Blessings for 2022. Monday was Dr. Martin Luther King federal holiday. I know many of you have probably been involved in many activities for Dr. King and read numerous posts on social media. Dr. King was a true activist. He was murdered April 1968. The federal holiday for Dr. King came about in 1983, 15 years after his death. All states did not embrace it, but by the year 2000, all 50 states embraced Martin Luther King federal holiday and state holiday. There were many activists before Dr. King. They worked on racism for too many years to count. They had won some significant victories, among them Brown versus Board of Education, which held that state law requirements requiring white students and black students to attend separate schools was unconstitutional. Dr. King's goals and objectives. Basically, he wanted to raise public consciousness of racism and end racial discrimination and segregation, which y'all know still going on. Dr. King's fellow civil rights fighters faced enormous and often brutal opposition on the road from local officials and public forces in southern states, from civil rights opponents, white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, etc. His message was also that nonviolence was the way to go for our people, even though there were arrests, churches being bombed, blacks still being hung. He and his fellow civil rights fighters would not quit, and they would not be quiet. April 4th, 1968, like I mentioned earlier, when Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered. He was shot while standing on a balcony outside his second-floor room at the Lorraine Motel. I visited that area once, my husband and I. If you ever get a chance, please go visit that site. It's very emotional when you read the signs. Just imagine him standing on that balcony and that shot coming from out of nowhere and striking him. He was rushed to the hospital and died an hour later. There was sadness around the world and in the United States. All hell broke out across the United States and around the world. Just what Dr. King didn't want us to do, violence. He did not embrace that. Well, what are we doing today? Have we forgot about his dream, his goals, etc.? We have come a very long way since his death, but we have an awful long way to go. Racism has just changed its face, as it has since the beginning of slavery as we know it. I'm going to take this time to read something to you, and you can Google everything that I'm talking to you about or passing on to you. On May the 16th, 2010, Aiyana Jones, a 7-year-old in Detroit, Michigan, was shot in the head. She was killed by police during a police raid. March the 21st, 2012, 22-year-old Rekia Boyd, Chicago, Illinois, shot by an off-duty police officer. He was charged and found not guilty. November 29, 2012, Timothy Russell, a 43-year-old man, and Melissa Williams were riding in their car together in East Cleveland. They were shot by 6 police officers 22 minutes after a car chase. The police said they thought the victims were shooting at them, yet they had no weapons in the car or on them. One officer lost his job at the police department. None were found guilty. September 14th, 2013, 24-year-old Jonathan Farrell, North Carolina. After crashing his car, he knocked on a woman's door, who happened to be white, to get help. She called the police saying somebody was breaking in. The police showed up. When they arrived, Farrell walked towards them. He was tased and then shot. He had no weapon, shooting him 12 times. His blood analysis after his death showed that he had no drugs in his system. April 30th, 2014, 31-year-old Dante Hamilton, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, shot at Red Arrow Park. July the 17th, 2014, Eric Gardner, I know y'all remember this one, 56-year-old male in New York City. He begged, "I can't breathe," 11 times until he was dead. A chokehold by a police officer while the world watched on TV. This was emotional, so we won't delve into it. August the 5th, 2014, 22-year-old John Crawford, Beaver Creek, Ohio. He was holding a BB gun, which the police thought was a real gun. The officers made a mistake, and he was not charged. August 9th, 2014, Michael Brown, Ferguson, Missouri, and I know you remember this one. After he struggled with a police officer, he decided to run. Officer Wilson pursued Brown. When he got up to Brown, she shot him 6 times in the back. Where Brown lay dead in the street, Officer Wilson was not charged. August 11th, 2014, 25-year-old Ezel Ford, LA, died from multiple gunshot wounds, and no officer was charged. November the 20th, 2014, Akai Gurley, 18-year-old, Brooklyn, New York. He and his girlfriend were in the hallway where they lived. Officers shot at a suspect, and a bullet ricocheted off the wall and killed him. Officer was indicted. November the 22nd, 2014, 12-year-old Tamar Rice, and y'all know you remember this, Cleveland, Ohio. He was shot while holding a toy gun. The 911 dispatcher said that they told the police about it looking like a toy gun. The officer said they never received that message. Get this, the dispatcher was suspended for 8 days. Wow. December 30th, 2014, 36-year-old Jermaine Reed, killed after running through a stop sign, pulled over and killed. Now, why do you think our people don't want to stop when the police pull them over? Because they don't know what to expect. People of color have to train their boys, especially their boys. When they get pulled over by police, don't say anything. Put your hands on the dashboard, don't even hardly blink, and don't have nothing to say, and don't talk back. March 1st, 2015, 43-year-old Charlie Landia K. Young, Louisiana. He lived in a tent on Skid Row. Got in an argument somewhere out there with somebody. The police were called, and he was shot and killed. He had no weapon. March 6, 2015, 19-year-old Tony Robinson, Madison, Wisconsin, unarmed and shot 6 times. March 9, 2015, 26-year-old Anthony Hill, Chamblee, Georgia. Police shot him twice. Officer charged and got 12 years in prison and blocked from working any law enforcement on his discharge from prison. April 2015, 44-year-old Eric Harris, Tulsa, Oklahoma. A reserve officer, 73 years old, said he thought he was pulling his taser, but it was his gun that he pulled and killed this young man. Bates was found guilty and got 4 years and can no longer be a reserve police officer. April 4th, 2015, Walter Scott, 50 years old, North Charleston, North Carolina, pulled over for a non-functioning brake light, shot in the back 6 times while running from the car. Officer convicted and got 20 years. April 12, 2015, and y'all know you probably remember this one. 25-year-old Freddie Gray, Baltimore, Maryland. Arrested and handcuffed and put in the back of a police van. He was not secured. He was rolling around that van and bumping into the walls and all kinds of things. When they got him to where they were going, he was unconscious. He fell into a coma. He did not have to die. All they had to do was secure him in that seat. April 26, 2015. 18-year-old William Chapman, Portsmouth, Virginia. Someone in the store called and said there was somebody shoplifting in the store, and that was this young man. When a police officer came, they shot him 2 times. The officer was found guilty and did 30 months for this killing. July 8th, Jonathan Sanders, 39-year-old, Stonewall, Mississippi. July 19th, 43-year-old Samuel Du Bois, Cincinnati, Ohio. November 13th, 37-year-old Tanisha Anderson. You probably remember this one, Cleveland, Ohio. The officer placed his knee on her neck, and she stopped breathing. Her family had called for a mental health visit. That police officer got a 10-day suspension. They need more training when it comes to mental health when they are called for mental health involvement or intervention. November 15th, 24-year-old Janice Clark, Minneapolis, Minnesota, was in a fight at a party. He was unarmed, but he was killed. I know you're probably trying to hear this right now, but let me bring you up to 2020. So 2016, there were 3 shootings. 2017, 1. 2018, 2. 2019, 0. 2020, Emmanuel Ellis, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Andre Hill, Deontay Wright, Linda Maina. Do I need to tell you more? You can Google this. How many people have died from this senseless killing, from police brutality and racial violence? It's just ridiculous. This racial stuff is just too much. Let's talk about the mistreatment of Asians. March 18, 2021. Anti-Asian hate crimes have spiked 150% since the pandemic began. Why? People of Asian descent have been living in the United States for more than 160 years and have long been the target of bigotry. You must look this one up. People versus Hall. Chinese immigrants came in large numbers to work in California, in the western states, in mining and railroad construction. They worked for pennies on the dollar, the most dangerous jobs. Almost immediately, the racist troops started. They were saying that the Asians were coming to steal the jobs from the white people. The California Supreme Court reinforced the racism against the Asian immigrants. That's the government, folks. October 24th, 1871, before we were born. Chinese massacre of 1871. You must look that one up. Following the murder of a white man caught in a crossfire between rival Chinese groups. Yeah, the Chinese were fighting each other too for those jobs. More than 500 white and Hispanic rioters surrounded and attacked Los Angeles' small Chinese community, continued or centered in the red light district, known as Negro Alley. At least 17 Chinese men and boys, listen to me, men and boys, children, were lynched. They were hung across several downtown sites, anywhere the rioters could string a noose. 8 of the rioters out of 500 were convicted of manslaughter, but the convictions were not held up. No one served a day or were punished for any of that. The Asians helped the Continental Railroad. They have paid their dues to the United States of America. As of April 2021, 1/3 of Asian Americans fear threats, physical attacks, and most say violence against them is rising. Come on, America. This is not what we are supposed to be doing. It is not. And let me not forget the Irish. I have Irish blood running through my veins. More than 150 years, it was the Irish who were refugees forced into exile by humanitarian and political disaster. The refugees were seeking haven in America. They were poor and disease-ridden. The Americans felt that this was not good for them and they would lose their jobs. They worried that their welfare budget would be drained. They accused them of bringing crime and rapists to their country. For centuries, British laws had deprived Ireland Catholics of their right to worship, vote, speak their language, and own land, horses, or guns. They were denied food when the famine came. Now you know what happened there. Under armed guard, food convoys spread out and gave wheat, oats, and barley to the English, white. The Irish were starved. Lured racism to the core. 1852, 1 million Irish perished. Another 2 million abandoned the land that they felt abandoned them. Nearly a quarter of the Irish exiles washed up on the shores of the United States. They knew nothing of the United States except that it had to be better than the hell that they came from. And we cannot forget what the Jewish people went through. Violent attacks and failed attack plots targeting the Jewish institutions in the United States from 1957 until the present. The ones you may remember. 1972, the Sher Tikva Synagogue in Temple Hills, Maryland. 1977, Benai Brinks, Washington, D.C. 1994, attack on a van carrying students, Jewish students, during a movement. 2009, a shooting at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial. 2011, plots by Muslims in Manhattan, New York. 2016, Islamic attack on a restaurant that displayed the Israeli flag. 2018, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. I know you remember that.
High school homework.
12 of the adults who died in that shooting went to Westinghouse High School when they were children. The same school my husband graduated from in Pittsburgh in 1990. In 2019, New Jersey shooting at Kosher Supermarket. 44 in all may lost their lives. And let's talk about the Native Americans. Yes, Indian blood is running through my veins too. Let's keep it real. First, let's start off by saying the reservation system that the government came out with was systemic racism. Tribal lands were broken down into plots of land for the Native Americans. That was confinement and so unfair because the Native Americans owned everything when the British got here. The system was created to keep Native Americans off the lands that the Europeans wished to settle. Battles went on for years between Native Americans and the European settlers. From treaty agreements to forcible removal, declarations of war. Look up the Indian Removal Act of 1830. The U.S. government forcibly relocated 5 civilized tribes: Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, Seminole, to territories that they wanted them to be in. And most of those territories were in the West: Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma. Please also look up and read about the death march that would become known as the Trail of Tears. When these Native Americans are traveling to all these places where they wanted them to be located to, they had to walk. They had to walk. So you can imagine how many lives were lost in getting there. And they were transported by the government. The system had to be crowded. So you can imagine how many people lost their lives during that. Let's be real, folks. Native Americans owned it all. The government has consistently created ways to keep every race in its place. When you go fill a job application, what do they ask on a job application? Will you identify with white, black, Afro-American, Asian Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, and other specific islanders? Come on, y'all. That's systematic racism. They put us in pockets again, in boxes again, to keep everybody in their place. We're supposed to be a country where everybody is treated equally. It shouldn't matter what color our skin is or what we look like. Dr. King once referred to the other America in one of his speeches. The other America was the people who are placed in all those categories and boxes. There's no such thing as the other America. There should be no racism, no inequality, no voter suppression, no illegal incarcerations. Everybody was placed in this planet or in this universe by whoever created the universe. We all deserve to be treated equally. And they get me on the gender thing. I'm going to have to read this one to you, okay? Agender, cisgender, bigender, gender fluid, gender queer, intersex, gender expression, MX, meaning gender neutral, third gender, transgender, two-spirit. Is that enough for you? Really? I don't give a kitty what gender somebody is. That's their business. It ain't mine. And this is for all of us. Dr. King said, don't be afraid or ashamed of your color. Don't be ashamed of your biological features, what you look like. Somehow we must all be able to say in our own words that we are proud of who we are. This is a good time to sip your tea. I know my throat is dry. I know I've shared a lot of information with you. You can look up anything you want. And let me say this to you. Everything that I told you and said to you about all these things is my personal feelings about racism. It needs to stop. And I can say this too. I'd like to say this. I often want to sit back and say, will racism ever stop? In all honesty, this is just my opinion. I don't think so. As long as the government continues to categorize everything into all these boxes and places and things like that, it's not going to happen. And as long as everybody's a different color and different nationality, somebody's always going to be mad about something. So at best, we need to all figure out how to tolerate each other without killing each other. That being said, thank you for stopping by. See you next time.